I've noticed we're losing subscribers. Not the YouTube kind, but the kind that swore they'd be in my life forever. Funny how that works. One day you're surrounded by people who claim to love you, and the next, you're watching them walk away like you were just another phase in their lives. By the way, if you're here, do me a favor, subscribe. It's free, and unlike some people in my life, you won't regret sticking around. My younger brother Leon, 26, had just graduated from community college around the same time I, 28, finally made the decision to propose to Nina, my high school love, after a decade together. I couldn't have been happier, and after such a long journey, it was finally time to make this official. 2 weeks ago, I popped the question, and just last weekend I threw a party to celebrate our engagement. The invites were sent and the excitement built, but little did I know my family had other plans. The chaos began when I invited my close family, my parents and Leon. They reached out to me demanding I cancel my celebration. At first I was stunned. Why would they ask me to postpone such a significant event? I refused, only to find out that my parents had plans of their own. They had intended to throw Leon a graduation celebration on the same day. They hadn't sent out the invites yet, but once they knew about my engagement party, they realized a clash was inevitable. They insisted I back off and let them honor Leon. After all, they said, having 2 celebrations on the same day would create family strife. But I wasn't backing down. It was clear to me that this wasn't just about the event, it was about something much deeper. My family, especially my parents and Leon, had never been particularly close. Sure, we exchanged pleasantries on birthdays and holidays, but that was about it. They never knew about my engagement plans until I mentioned them, and I'm sure it surprised them. Leon, the golden child, had always been the center of attention. I couldn't help but feel frustrated and resentful. After all, my engagement to Nina, the love of my life for the past 10 years, seemed far more important than my brother's community college graduation. I had already sent out the invites. I wasn't going to back down, especially when it seemed like every accomplishment Leon had ever made was celebrated with fanfare. I remembered my own birthday, a quiet affair with just my parents and a few friends. Meanwhile, Leon had extravagant parties for every little achievement, even something as minor as finishing middle school. That pattern had never stopped, whether it was high school graduation, college graduation, or even small personal milestones. It was as if my accomplishments never mattered to them. By the time I left for college, I had already distanced myself from my parents. They paid for my education, but I kept my distance, focusing on my life, and it seemed they were content with that. Leon and I never got along either. We fought constantly growing up, and in high school we stopped talking altogether. My parents never seemed to care. Leon's behavior, spoiled, entitled, and bratty, was always overlooked, even when he got in trouble at school. I had learned to live without their approval, but this felt different. When Leon told them he wanted to join a startup selling graphic t-shirts, they supported him without question. But now, with my engagement on the line, their double standards were on full display, and I wasn't going to back down without a fight. Leon, having squandered our parents' hard-earned money on a failed business venture during his teenage years, was never held accountable. Despite the setback, he received a free pass, and after his venture crumbled, he decided to pursue a college degree. But his grades weren't enough for a university, so he stuck with community college. Finally, after a long gap, Leon graduated, and my parents were insistent on celebrating his achievement. That's when they asked me to cancel my engagement party so they could throw a celebration for Leon. It didn't sit right with me, and I'm sure anyone in my position would have made the same decision. What I was doing wasn't heartless, it was simply standing my ground. But my parents didn't see it that way. Over the phone, they treated me like I was the villain, accusing me of being against Leon and causing unnecessary drama. They said I was cruel for not postponing my engagement party, as though honoring my commitment to Nina, after 10 years together, was some sort of offense to them. I tried reasoning with them, attempting to keep the peace before the party, but it quickly became apparent that there was no reasoning with my parents. Frustrated, I finally snapped. I told them they were welcome to have their event on the same day as mine, but I wasn't changing anything to accommodate them, especially not for Leon. I hung up and blocked them. The next 4 days were silent from their side, and I thought that might be the end of it. However, I began hearing from some of my relatives, who informed me that they too had been invited to Leon's graduation party, on the very same day as my engagement celebration. The tension was palpable, and it became clear that my family was torn between 2 loyalties. I made a conscious effort to stay out of the drama and respected whatever decision they made. If they chose Leon's party over mine, I couldn't force them to come. Of course, deep down I couldn't help but feel hurt if some of them skipped my celebration for his, but I kept my distance and stayed out of it. But then things took a turn for the worse. 3 days ago, I found out through my cousin that my parents had been actively spreading the narrative that I had intentionally scheduled my engagement party on the same day as Leon's graduation. According to them, it was a deliberate attempt to overshadow his achievement. The audacity of it all was staggering. They had been painting me as the villain, telling anyone who would listen that I had been nothing but terrible to them. It was their attempt to rally support, to make me seem malicious for celebrating my own joy on the same day as Leon's milestone. My cousin relayed to me that my parents had warned everyone not to attend my engagement party, turning relatives against me. That was the final straw. If they wanted a fight, I'd give it to them. I sent out another round of invites for my party, this time directly targeting the very relatives they were trying to sway. The game had changed, and now I was ready to play by my own rules. They had been plotting for weeks, but little did they know two could play this game. If my parents were going to badmouth me and manipulate the narrative, I figured it was time to stop playing nice. I wasn't about to let them twist the truth. I didn't need to fabricate anything to make them look bad. My reality was far worse than any lies they could tell. So, I took the direct approach and reached out to everyone invited to my engagement party. I told them the truth. My parents had been spreading a distorted version of events, trying to paint me as the villain. I explained exactly what had happened, recounting the phone call where they demanded I cancel my celebration for Leon's graduation. I laid bare the history of how Leon was always treated like the golden child, how every one of his actions, no matter how small, was treated like a grand achievement. Meanwhile, I'd been left in the shadows, ignored and overlooked. I'd lived with it for years, but now it was different. Now they expected me to cancel my engagement celebration just to cater to Leon. It wasn't right. I also made it clear that if anyone chose to side with my parents, that was their decision. But I told them not to bother reaching out to me afterward. I wasn't going to keep pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. I was done. It was a bold, direct message, and I wasn't sure how it would be received. To my relief, most of my family responded with support. They understood where I was coming from. Some of my cousins and younger uncles and aunts, who had seen firsthand how I'd been treated over the years, were quick to show their loyalty. It felt like a weight had been lifted, knowing that some people finally saw things my way. As for the older generation, they seemed to get the message too. Many of my relatives confirmed they would be attending my engagement party. It felt like a small victory. I was no longer alone in this. The night of the party arrived, and it was even better than I expected. Nina and I were ecstatic, surrounded by friends and family who had come to celebrate us. Surprisingly, almost everyone who had RSVP'd actually showed up, and the atmosphere was full of warmth and joy. Some of my relatives even mentioned that when they received messages from my parents, accusing me of deliberately scheduling my party on the same day as Leon's graduation, they knew something wasn't right. They couldn't believe I'd ever do something so underhanded. People were starting to see me for who I truly was, not the villain my parents had painted me as. What made it even more satisfying was hearing from others how glad they were that I wasn't bowing to my parents' pressure. They understood how unfairly I had been treated all my life, and they admired my strength for standing up to it. I wasn't just celebrating my engagement, I was celebrating my independence and reclaiming my dignity. By the end of the night, I was genuinely happy. The party had been a success, and I felt supported in ways I hadn't expected. But then this morning, I received an unexpected visit from my parents and Leon. When I woke up that morning, the last thing I wanted to deal with was my parents. But the doorbell kept ringing. Reluctantly, I answered. I had no intention of letting them in, especially after everything that had happened, but my dad insisted they weren't leaving until we had a conversation. Nina, seeing how agitated I was, convinced me to let them in. She said it might be best to get everything over with once and for all. I hadn't even had a chance to fully wake up when they started accusing me of things. My dad, looking furious, claimed that my actions were purely driven by jealousy. They told me that hardly anyone had shown up for their graduation party, and those who did left quickly to attend mine. It seemed they were still trying to paint me as the villain in this entire situation. I had already spoken my truth to the rest of the family, but now they were accusing me of intentionally trying to take the spotlight from Leon. They blamed me for causing a rift in the family, insinuating that I was separating everyone for my own selfish reasons. I was surprised by their audacity, still half-dazed from just waking up. It felt like nothing I said mattered, as though my words weren't even reaching them. But I stood firm, explaining that I hadn't intended to hurt anyone. I just wasn't going to cancel my engagement party for Leon, especially after everything that had happened. Nina, seeing the conversation was going nowhere, stepped in. She was done trying to reason with them, and she told them in no uncertain terms that she would call the police if they didn't leave. And just like that, they finally left, but not before Leon slammed the door with so much force that it shook the house. I was livid. For a moment, I thought about calling him back and giving him a piece of my mind, but I let it go. Nina and I had already blocked them from our phones, so I figured that was the end of it. An hour later, I received a message from an unknown number. It was probably from a friend or someone using someone else's phone, but the message left me speechless. They said that despite everything, we were still family and that they were disappointed I had scheduled my engagement party on the same day as Leon's graduation. They claimed I could have let him have this one thing, his celebration, since he was 26 and had nothing to show for it, having failed at his business venture. They apologized for trying to discredit me, but they said they had no other choice if they wanted the celebration to go smoothly. It felt like classic manipulation. I didn't even know how to respond. Part of me wondered if they were truly sorry, or if this was just another tactic to guilt-trip me into feeling bad for them. But I knew better. I wasn't falling for it. The whole thing was a mess, and as much as I wanted to make things right with my family, I knew it wasn't going to happen. Nina is still torn about the whole situation. She doesn't know if I made the right decision, but deep down I can't help but feel like I had no other choice. My relatives didn't step up as much as I had hoped, but they had always known the imbalance in the way my parents treated me and Leon. They tried to intervene, but my parents simply didn't care. It wasn't a matter of neglecting me, it was a matter of them always choosing Leon over me, and that pattern wasn't changing anytime soon. I don't think my relatives could have done anything more. Yes, I would have loved for them to be more vocal, but what were they supposed to do? Call the cops? Step in as my guardians? That would have been absurd. And at the end of the day, I was doing just fine. I'd stopped expecting anything from my parents long ago, and now nothing had really changed. I never really minded the way my parents placed Leon on a pedestal. For years, I've grown accustomed to the fact that as long as everything was paid for and the family was happy, they didn't seem to care about me. It used to bother me, but not anymore. I'm on good terms with the rest of my family, and while most of them maintain close relationships with my parents and Leon, I don't make them choose sides. I had made it clear that if they decided not to attend my engagement party, we would have a problem, but none of them chose that path. They all came, and in the end I couldn't bring myself to care. The situation between me, my parents, and Leon was something I wanted to handle alone, without dragging the rest of the family into it. I didn't expect them to take sides or get involved. This conflict was between my parents, my brother, and me, no one else. Update. After reading most of the responses on my initial post, I've concluded that I have no regrets. A few days after everything went down, I sent an email to my parents, letting them know I didn't feel like talking to them anymore and that I would appreciate it if they stayed away from me from now on. I also blocked them, including the number they'd contacted me from. For 3 days, I didn't hear anything from them or any of my relatives. But today that all changed. My mother showed up at our door just as Nina and I were preparing to leave for work. It was just her. My dad and Leon weren't with her. Normally, my mom is much more subdued than the others, so I figured maybe this could be a conversation where we could actually talk as adults. I decided to let her in. As soon as she sat down, she said she was there to talk to both of us. Nina joined the conversation too. My mom started by saying that she regretted everything that had happened recently and wanted to apologize on behalf of the three of them. Honestly, I didn't consider it a true apology. If they had genuinely wanted to apologize, they would have all come together to do so. But it was just my mom, and that didn't feel like enough. She continued, though, telling us she was still deeply offended by something that had happened during their last visit. Apparently, she felt that Nina had crossed a line by threatening to call the cops on my dad. To her, that was disrespectful, and she expected both Nina and me to apologize for our actions. She felt that Nina should apologize for shouting at my dad, and I should apologize for letting it happen without stepping in. For a moment, neither Nina nor I knew what to say. I was growing frustrated with the direction this conversation was taking, so I finally spoke up. I told my mother that, while I appreciated her coming over and attempting to apologize, it felt pointless. She had wasted half an hour of our time. This story is a powerful reminder about the importance of setting boundaries, standing up for yourself, and choosing your own happiness, even when faced with challenging family dynamics. Sometimes, it's crucial to prioritize your own well-being over expectations placed on you by others, especially when those expectations are unfair or manipulative. We all deserve to feel respected and valued in our relationships, whether with family, friends, or partners. While reconciliation can be a beautiful thing, it's also okay to walk away from toxic situations and find peace in your own life. In this case, the decision to not give in to the pressure and instead focus on what truly mattered, love, happiness, and mutual respect, was the right choice. As we move through life, it's essential to find the balance between standing our ground and being open to personal growth. You don't have to sacrifice your own happiness for others, especially when they've failed to treat you with the care and respect you deserve. Does this story resonate with you? Have you ever had to set boundaries or distance yourself from someone to protect your own peace? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories and life lessons.